2 words, 1 decision, and an empire trembled. In December 1936, a king stood at the center of the world's most powerful monarchy and chose to walk away from it. Not for war, not for scandal in the traditional sense, but for love. A love so controversial, so unacceptable to the very institution he represented, that it forced a moment in history where the British crown itself was tested. This is the story of King Edward VIII versus the crown, where love collided with duty, and the consequences reshaped a dynasty forever. He was never meant to be ordinary. Born into the powerful House of Windsor, Edward, known to family as David, was groomed from birth to lead. As Prince of Wales, he was charismatic, modern, and deeply adored by the public. He broke traditions, connected with ordinary citizens, and carried a charm that made him one of the most popular royal figures of his time. But beneath the polished image of a future king was a man restless with expectation. The crown, with all its rules, rituals, and responsibilities, was not just a privilege, it was a prison. Then came the woman who would change everything. Wallis Simpson was not what the British monarchy expected for its future queen. She was American, she was outspoken, and most controversially, she was twice divorced, a status that clashed directly with the moral and religious expectations of the Church of England, of which the monarch is the supreme governor. At the time, divorce carried heavy stigma, especially within royal circles. For a king to marry a divorced woman with 2 living ex-husbands, it was unthinkable. But Edward didn't see scandal, he saw love. Their relationship grew rapidly, drawing attention from royal insiders, politicians, and eventually the global press. What began as whispers behind palace doors soon escalated into a constitutional crisis. Because this was no longer just about personal choice, it was about the stability of the monarchy itself. The British government, led by Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin, made their position clear. Edward could not marry Wallis Simpson and remain king. The dominions of the British Empire, Canada, Australia, South Africa, also opposed the union. The Church would not support it. The crown, built on centuries of tradition, could not bend for one man's love. Edward was faced with an impossible choice: power or love, the crown or the woman he refused to live without. In private, the pressure was relentless. Advisors warned him of the consequences. His own family struggled to understand his defiance. His younger brother, King George VI, watched as the burden of the throne slowly shifted toward him, a role he had never expected nor wanted. Behind the grand walls of Buckingham Palace, tension turned into quiet heartbreak. But Edward would not yield. On December 10, 1936, he signed the Instrument of Abdication. Less than a year after ascending the throne, King Edward VIII made a decision that stunned the world. He gave up the crown. The following day, his voice reached millions through a historic radio broadcast. Calm, measured, but filled with quiet emotion. In that speech, he uttered words that would echo through history. I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility without the help and support of the woman I love. And just like that, he was no longer king. The crown moved on. It had to. His brother ascended as King George VI, ushering in a new chapter during one of the most turbulent periods in modern history, World War II. The monarchy stabilized. The institution endured. And from George VI's line would come Queen Elizabeth II, whose reign would define the crown for generations. But Edward's story didn't end. It simply changed. Stripped of his royal status and given the title Duke of Windsor, Edward married Wallis Simpson in 1937. It was a quiet ceremony in France. No members of the royal family attended. The separation was not just physical. It was emotional, symbolic, permanent. He had chosen love, but at the cost of belonging. Together, Edward and Wallis lived a life of exile, glamorous on the surface, moving through elite social circles, attending high-profile events, but always existing on the outside of the institution Edward once led. There were whispers, controversies, even political tensions during World War II regarding Edward's views and associations. Yet through it all, one thing remained constant: his devotion to Wallis. But here lies the haunting question that history continues to ask. Was it worth it? Did he truly lose everything, or did he gain something the crown could never give? The answer is not simple, because Edward's choice revealed something deeper than scandal. It exposed the human cost of monarchy. The crown demands sacrifice. It demands obedience to tradition, even at the expense of personal happiness. For centuries, monarchs have carried this burden silently. But Edward refused to, and in doing so, he broke the illusion that royalty lives above human struggle. His story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Even kings are not free. Even kings must choose. And sometimes the price of love is everything. Looking back, historians remain divided. Some see Edward as selfish, a man who abandoned duty at a critical moment. Others see him as courageous, a man who chose authenticity over obligation. The reality likely lies somewhere in between. He was both flawed and fearless, privileged yet deeply human. But one thing is undeniable: his decision changed the course of history. Without his abdication, there would have been no King George VI as wartime leader, no Queen Elizabeth II rising from that line. The modern monarchy, as we know it today, exists partly because one man walked away from the throne. A single choice reshaped a century. And yet, beyond the politics, beyond the history, beyond the headlines, this remains, at its core, a deeply personal story. A man in love, a crown in conflict, a decision that could never be undone. So now the question turns to you. If you were in his place, what would you choose? Power or love? Duty or freedom? The crown or your heart? Because history is not just something we study, it's something we feel. And Edward's story reminds us that behind every title, every throne, every crown is a human being facing impossible choices. What do you think? Was King Edward VIII a man who followed his heart, or a king who failed his duty? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tag someone who loves royal history and type #Edward vs the Crown to join the conversation. Because some decisions don't just change a life, they change history.